Dad's silent revenge.
4 days before Christmas, my daughter called and said 7 words that made me realize everything I thought I knew about being a father was wrong. Dad, don't come. Howard says it's too complicated. I stood in my kitchen in Denver, Colorado, holding the phone, watching snow fall outside my window. I was 58 years old, a retired police detective who had spent 23 years on the force and 35 years raising that girl, walking her to school, teaching her to drive, paying for her college, dancing at her wedding. Now her husband had decided I was too complicated for their Christmas dinner. My name is Eugene Patterson, and I'm 64 now. I'm telling you this with 6 years of clarity I didn't have back then. See, I spent most of my adult life believing I was a good father. I worked hard, provided well, showed up to every recital and graduation. I thought that was enough. But sitting alone in that steakhouse on Christmas Eve, I learned something that would change everything. Sometimes being a good provider doesn't mean anything if the people you provided for are planning to take everything you've got left. The restaurant was called the Copper Grill, one of those upscale places downtown on 16th Street that stays open on holidays for people who have nowhere else to go. The hostess gave me a sympathetic look when I walked in alone, snow still melting on my coat shoulders. She seated me near the window overlooking the mall, away from the families, like she understood I didn't need to watch other people's happiness up close. I ordered a ribeye and a glass of red wine. The steak was probably excellent. I couldn't taste it. All I could think about was Beverly's voice on the phone 4 days earlier, the way she'd lowered it like she was afraid Howard might hear her being too kind to me, the way she'd stumbled over her words like she was reading from a script. Dad, don't come. Howard says it's too complicated. I had asked what that meant. Complicated how? We had done Christmas, together for the past 5 years since she got married. I had never caused problems. I brought gifts, helped with dishes, played with my grandson Victor. I thought things were fine between us. Sure, Howard was always a little cold, but I figured that was just his personality. It's just with his parents coming this year and the house being small and everything that happened at Thanksgiving. What happened at Thanksgiving was that I had quietly disagreed with Howard about politics at the dinner table. Not loudly, not rudely. I had simply said I saw things differently and changed the subject to Victor's school. Howard had been cold to me the rest of the evening, getting up whenever I entered a room, cutting conversations short. Beverly had apologized to him 3 times that I heard, probably more times that I didn't. Beverly, I had said carefully, I'm your father. I haven't seen you since October. I just want to spend Christmas with my family. The pause on the line had been long, enough for me to hear Howard's voice in the background, impatient, asking who she was talking to. I heard her cover the phone, heard muffled conversation, heard her sigh. I'm sorry, Dad. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. Like I was a magazine subscription she was thinking about renewing. So there I was on Christmas Eve, 58 years old, divorced for 12 years, sitting alone in a restaurant full of strangers, wondering how I had ended up so completely unnecessary to the people I had built my life around. The snow was coming down heavier now, coating the cars in the parking lot, and I watched families hurrying past the window with their shopping bags and their laughter. That's when Albert Gibson walked up to my table. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing a cardigan that looked hand-knitted. His wife Ruth stood a few feet behind him, small and elegant with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Excuse me," Albert said, his voice warm with a slight southern accent. "I couldn't help noticing you're alone tonight. My wife and I have a table for 4, but it's just the 2 of us. Would you like to join us?" I almost said no. Every instinct told me to protect my privacy, to handle my loneliness the way men of my generation were taught to handle it, quietly, invisibly, without burdening anyone. I'd spent enough years as a cop to know that most people's kindness comes with strings attached. But something in Albert's face stopped me. There was no pity there, no awkward charity, just simple human recognition. One lonely person reaching out to another on a night when nobody should be alone. "I don't want to intrude on your evening," I said, gesturing toward their table across the dining room, where I could see wrapped gifts beside their chairs. "You wouldn't be intruding," Ruth said, stepping forward. Her voice was warm, genuinely welcoming, like honey over gravel. "We genuinely enjoy the company. Our children are scattered all over the country this year. It's just us and too much food." I looked at my half-eaten steak, at the empty chairs around me, at the families laughing and talking at every other table. Through the window, I could see couples walking hand in hand through the snow, heading home to warm houses filled with people who wanted them there. I made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," I said, standing up and grabbing my wine glass. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." That first dinner with Albert and Ruth Gibson lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. Albert had been a high school principal for 30 years before retiring, spending most of his career at East High School here in Denver. Ruth had been a nurse at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, then moved into nursing education at the community college. They had 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren spread across California, Georgia, and Maine. "Holidays used to be chaos," Ruth said, laughing as she cut into her prime rib. "Kids running everywhere, dogs barking, someone always crying about something. Now they're quiet. We're still figuring out what quiet looks like." I told them about Beverly, about Howard, about the phone call 4 days ago. I hadn't planned to share so much with strangers, but something about their presence made honesty feel safe. Maybe it was Albert's way of listening without judgment, or Ruth's gentle questions that showed she was really paying attention. "That's hard," Albert said simply when I finished. He didn't offer advice or try to fix anything. He just acknowledged the pain. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed to hear. When the check came, Albert insisted on paying for my meal despite my protests. "Consider it a Christmas gift," he said, waving away my wallet. "And Eugene, if you're not doing anything next Sunday, Ruth makes the best pot roast in Denver. We'd love to have you over." I almost said no again. I almost retreated back into my careful, protected solitude. But Ruth was already writing their address on a napkin, and Albert was shaking my hand like we had known each other for years, instead of hours. 6 o'clock, Ruth said, pressing the napkin into my palm. "Don't bring anything except yourself." I took the napkin, put it in my wallet, and drove home through the snowy Denver streets, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That first Sunday dinner at the Gibson house was the beginning of everything. Their home was a 2-story Craftsman in the Park Hill neighborhood, one of those solid brick houses built in the 1920s with wide front porches and big windows. The inside was filled with books and photographs and the smell of something delicious cooking. You could tell immediately it was a house where people had been happy for a long time. Albert met me at the door and immediately put me to work, helping him set the table in their dining room. "Ruth has very specific ideas about how the table should look," he whispered conspiratorially as he handed me cloth napkins. "I've been married to her for 41 years, and I still get it wrong sometimes." Ruth appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron that read, "World's Best Grandmother." "I heard that, Albert Gibson, and you do not get it wrong, you just get it different." She winked at me. "Welcome, Eugene. Make yourself at home." That evening, I met their youngest son, Frederick, who lived in Denver, with his wife Nancy and their 2 children. Frederick worked as a bank manager downtown, and Nancy was an office administrator for a law firm. The grandchildren, Carolyn, who was 16, and Arthur, who was 14, immediately adopted me as a new audience for their stories and school projects. By the time dinner was served, I had learned about Carolyn's obsession with marine biology and her plans to study oceanography in college. Arthur was convinced he would one day design video games for NASA, combining his love of space and programming. "Don't try to talk him out of it," Frederick said, grinning as he helped his mother carry dishes from the kitchen. "He's already designed a space exploration game with realistic physics. Kid's got more talent in his little finger than most adults have in their whole bodies." The pot roast was exactly as good as Albert had promised, but what I remember most about that dinner wasn't the food. It was the way everyone talked over each other with affection rather than irritation. The way Albert reached for Ruth's hand during quiet moments. The way Frederick and Nancy worked as a team, clearing dishes without anyone having to ask. The way the children were included in conversations instead of shushed or sent to another room. This was what family was supposed to look like. This was what I had always wanted with Beverly, what I had dreamed of when she was little, and I was reading her bedtime stories and teaching her to ride a bike. When I left that night, Ruth hugged me. At the door, like I was already part of the family. "Same time next Sunday, Eugene, and every Sunday after that if you want." I wanted, more than I had wanted anything in a long time. 1 year passed, then 18 months. The Sunday dinners at the Gibson house became the fixed point around which my life rotated. I started arriving early to help Albert with small repairs around the house, fixing leaky faucets and squeaky doors. I taught Arthur how to play chess on the old wooden set Albert had inherited from his father. I helped Carolyn with her science projects, drawing on my years of evidence analysis to help her design better experiments. Ruth insisted I had a magic touch with her vegetable garden, though I suspected she was just being kind when she credited me for her prize-winning tomatoes. The truth was, working in that garden gave me peace I hadn't felt since I was a kid, helping my own grandmother tend her roses back in Oklahoma. I didn't hear from Beverly during that first year and a half. Not on my birthday in March, not on Father's Day, not on Christmas. I sent cards and gifts for Victor's birthday and received brief thank you texts in return. Always from Beverly's phone, never a call from Victor himself. I called twice during those months. Both times Beverly was too busy to talk and promised to call back. She never did. The silence hurt. It hurt every single day, like a low-grade fever that never quite goes away. But the pain was different now because it existed alongside something else. Belonging, community, purpose. The Gibson family wasn't replacing my daughter. Nothing could do that. But they were teaching me something crucial. I could be loved without earning it. I could matter to people who had no obligation to care about me. I could be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February. I was at the community center on Colfax Avenue where I volunteered, teaching computer basics to seniors when my phone buzzed. Beverly's name on the screen made my heart jump like it always did, even after all those months of silence. Dad. Her voice sounded strange, thin, not like the confident woman I remembered. Can we talk? I stepped outside into the cold air, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Of course, I'm here. Howard and I are having some problems, financial problems. The business isn't doing well, and we got behind on some payments. There's this debt that we need to clear before the bank. She trailed off. I waited, my heart pounding, hoping for something. An apology, an acknowledgement, some recognition that she had hurt me and wanted to make it right. Some explanation for why she had cut me out of her life and Victor's life for 18 months. Dad, I need $75,000. I know it's a lot, but you have the retirement fund, and Howard says if we can just get through this quarter, everything will stabilize. Howard says. Always, Howard says. Beverly, I said slowly, watching my breath make clouds in the winter air. When did we last speak? Before today. Silence on the line. I'm trying to remember, I continued. Was it the Christmas you disinvited me? No, wait. You texted me in January after that. Happy New Year. 3 words. Was that it? 18 months of nothing. And now you're calling to ask for $75,000. That's not fair. Her voice sharpened, taking on that defensive tone I remembered from when she was a teenager caught in a lie. You know things have been complicated with Howard and his family. You know he has opinions about me, I finished. Yes, I know. I'm too complicated, too different, too something. I've been whatever he needed me to be for 18 months, Beverly. I've been invisible. And now suddenly you need money and I exist again. I'm your daughter. She was crying now, but something about it felt rehearsed. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The question hit, like a physical blow, because of course it meant something. It meant everything. She was my daughter, my only child, the person I had loved most in the world for 35 years. But she was also the person who had chosen her husband's comfort over her father's presence, who had let 18 months pass without a real conversation, who was calling now, not because she missed me, but because she needed something from me. And here's where my cop instincts kicked in. Something about this call felt wrong. The timing, the amount, the way she kept referring to Howard's opinions like she was reading from a script. Beverly, I love you. I have always loved you, but I can't give you $75,000. Why not? You have it. I know you do. There it was. The assumption that my money was somehow hers by right. The certainty about my financial situation that she shouldn't have unless she'd been checking up on me. Because giving you that money won't fix what's actually broken. Because Howard will find another crisis next year and another one after that. And I'll become the person who solves his problems with my retirement fund until there's nothing left. So you're choosing money over your own daughter? That's who you are? That's the kind of father you've become? No, I said, and my voice was steady despite the trembling in my hands. I'm the kind of father who learned that love isn't the same as being used. I'm choosing to be valued, not just needed. There was a long pause. Then Beverly spoke, and her words were cold and precise. "You know what, Dad? Howard was right about you. He always said you were selfish underneath all that nice guy exterior. I defended you for years. I won't make that mistake again. Don't call me, don't text me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice." The line went dead. I stood there in the parking lot, the phone still in my hand, and waited for the devastation to hit. It did, but mixed with the grief was something unexpected. Clarity. For the first time, I had heard my daughter's real voice, not the one filtered through guilt and manipulation. And what I heard was someone I didn't recognize. But here's the thing about being a cop for 23 years. You develop instincts, and my instincts were telling me that phone call wasn't what it seemed. Beverly had been too prepared, too rehearsed. The financial crisis story felt manufactured, and the way she'd pushed for exactly $75,000, not $70,000 or $80,000, suggested someone had done homework on what they thought I could afford. That evening, I drove to the Gibson house, even though it wasn't Sunday. Albert answered the door and took one look at my face. "Come in, Eugene. Ruth's making tea." I told them everything. Beverly's call, the money, the ultimatum, the cold click of disconnection. They listened without interrupting, the way they always did. Albert's hand on my shoulder, while Ruth held my shaking hands. "You did the right thing," Ruth said firmly when I finished. "Boundaries aren't abandonment. It doesn't feel like the right thing. It feels like I just lost my daughter." "You didn't lose her today," Albert said gently. "You lost her a long time ago, piece by piece. Today you just finally let yourself see it." But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. A lot more. I started paying attention, real attention, the kind I used to pay to suspects who thought they were smarter than they were. 3 weeks later, I was having lunch at a diner on South Broadway when I saw Beverly coming out of an expensive steakhouse with Howard. They were laughing, dressed in clothes that didn't look like they came from people facing financial ruin. Beverly was carrying shopping bags from stores that don't exactly scream budget crisis. I followed them. Old habits. They went to a Mercedes dealership on Colorado Boulevard, not to sell a car, to look at new ones. I watched through the showroom window as Howard test drove a $60,000 sedan, while Beverly sat in the passenger seat, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. That night, I made some calls. My old partner Jerry still had connections at the department. Within a week, I knew Howard's business was actually doing fine, better than fine. The insurance agency he claimed was failing had just signed 3 major commercial contracts. I also knew Howard had been married before, to an older woman in Phoenix who had died under mysterious circumstances, 6 months after changing her will to leave him everything. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they made turned my blood cold. I started documenting everything. Photos of Beverly and Howard's expensive dinners, screenshots of social media posts showing their lifestyle, bank records I probably shouldn't have been able to access but somehow did anyway, credit reports, property records. What I found was a pattern. Howard would target women with assets, isolate them from their families, create financial emergencies that required accessing their money, then gradually take control of everything. Beverly wasn't his first victim. She was his accomplice. I needed proof they were actively planning to defraud me, not just living beyond their means. So I gave them an opportunity to show their hand. I called Beverly in April. "Beverly, it's Dad. I've been thinking about what you said, about the money." Her voice changed instantly, warmer, more animated. "Dad, really? I mean, I thought after our last conversation, I've been having some memory issues lately, forgetting things. My doctor thinks it might be early stages of dementia." The lie came easily, too easily, but I needed her to think I was vulnerable. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. That must be terrifying for you." "It is, and it's making me think about my finances, about making sure everything's in order before I can't make those decisions anymore." "That's smart, Dad. Really smart. Maybe Howard and I could help you organize everything. You know, make sure your affairs are in order." Bingo. We arranged to meet the following Sunday, at my house, where I had installed cameras in every room the day before. They came prepared. Howard brought a briefcase full of documents, power of attorney forms, financial transfer papers, even a will that would leave everything to Beverly while making Howard the executor. I played my part, confused, forgetful, grateful for their help. I signed some papers, refused to sign others, asked for time to think. All while the cameras recorded every word. "You know, Dad," Beverly said as they were leaving, "it might be easier if you moved somewhere with more support. There are some really nice facilities in the area." Facilities? Assisted living places, where they can help you with your memory issues, keep you safe. Howard nodded seriously. "With your condition progressing, it's really the responsible thing to do. And don't worry about the house. We'll handle selling it. For you." After they left, I sat in my living room and watched the recordings. My own daughter and her husband, planning to have me declared incompetent, steal my assets, and warehouse me in a nursing home, all while I was perfectly healthy and sharp as I'd ever been. I made copies of everything, sent them to Jerry, called my lawyer, contacted Adult Protective Services. The confrontation came in June. Beverly and Howard arrived unannounced, with papers from a doctor declaring me incompetent based on Beverly's reports of my condition. They also brought 2 men they introduced as caregivers who would help me pack. "I'm sorry it has to be this way, Dad," Beverly said, not sounding sorry at all. "But you're not capable of making these decisions anymore." That's when I played the recording of our April conversation, her voice clear as day. "If we can get him declared incompetent, all his assets transfer to me automatically. The house alone is worth $400,000. It's perfect." The color drained from Beverly's face. Howard started backing toward the door. 23 years on the force," I said calmly. "You think I didn't know you were running a con?" The next few hours were chaos, arrests, interrogations. Beverly pleaded guilty to attempted elder abuse and fraud. Howard got deported after serving time for immigration violations. I got custody of Victor, and I got something else I didn't expect. Last Christmas, almost 3 years after that lonely dinner at the Copper Grill, I stood in Albert and Ruth's living room with a glass of wine in my hand and watched 3 generations of family laughing together. Victor caught my eye across the room and grinned. "Hey, Grandpa, thanks for not giving up." "That's what family does," I said. "The real kind anyway." And Ruth, listening from the kitchen doorway, smiled and said, "That's what family does, all of us." My name is Eugene Patterson. I'm 64 years old, and I'm finally living with real family. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who shows up when your world falls apart and who celebrates when you rebuild it stronger. The best revenge against those who try to exploit your love is building a life so meaningful that their absence becomes irrelevant.